reading from the Holy Gospel according to St. John. The sisters of Lazarus sent word to Jesus saying, Master, the one you love is ill. And when Jesus heard this, he said, This illness is not to end in death, but it is for the glory of God. The Son of God may be glorified through it. Now, Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he remained for 2 days in the place where he was. Then, after this, he said to his disciples, Let us go back to Judea. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him. But Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, he will give you. And Jesus said to her, Your brother will rise. And Martha said, I know he will rise in the resurrection on the last day. And then Jesus told her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, even if he dies, will live. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, Yes, Lord. I have come to believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, the one who is coming into the world. He became perturbed and deeply troubled and said, Where have you laid him? And they said to him, Sir, come and see. And Jesus wept. And so the Jews said, See how he loved him. But some of them said, Could not the one who opened the eyes of the blind man have done something so that this man would not have died? So Jesus, perturbed again, came to the tomb. It was a cave. A stone lay across it. Jesus said, Take away the stone. Martha, the dead man's sister, said to him, Lord, by now there will be a stench, for he has been dead for 4 days. And Jesus said to her, Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And so they took away the stone. And Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd here, I have said this, that they may believe that you sent me. And when he had said this, he cried out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! And the dead man came out, tied hand and foot with burial bands. And his face was wrapped up in a cloth. And so Jesus said to him, Untie him and let him go. Now many of the Jews who had come to Mary and seen what he had done began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Glory to Jesus Christ. Father Francis here on this 5th Sunday in Lent. And believe it or not, next week will be Palm Sunday, and then that following Sunday will be Easter. So Easter is very close at hand. So, let me ask you a question. What did you give up for Lent? Now, you might think, well, that was a long time ago. Maybe you gave something up and only to accidentally pick it back up again, or maybe you got so stressed out you said, you know what, I need my coffee. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to have to drink coffee and just ask the Lord to understand. Well, and that's okay. But again, most of us try to make some kind of a Lenten resolution, and there's nothing wrong in that at all. But I think that sometimes, as we go through the Lenten season, we kind of look back maybe on our first, the first desire on Ash Wednesday to really enter deeply into this spirit of penance. And it's not a spirit of punishing ourselves and denying ourselves and depriving ourselves and being harsh on ourselves. It's really a spirit of conversion. It's like, okay, anytime when we've really put our minds to something, you move aside all the extraneous things so that you can really focus, like a laser beam focus on a project and say, this is what I really want to dedicate myself to, at least for this period of time. And, so I'm not going to let other things distract me. And basically that's what we try to do in Lent, is we set aside good things, like maybe meat and dairy and, things that we enjoy, treats like, our favorite desserts, things like that. We put those things aside, at least during the week, so that we can really focus maybe on prayer and our other Lenten disciplines and devotions, and also being of service to others, as God leads us to work out our participate in works of charity. Okay. So anyway, let me start off by saying, okay, so maybe you're wondering, so you're looking back on your Ash Wednesday beginnings and saying, well, okay, what did I do? What did I give up or whatever? Well, okay, I'll just share with you what I'm doing, and I'm not to say that I'm not doing it perfectly, because I haven't. I have had a little setback, and I'll explain that in a moment. But what I decided to do, and again, I don't know what this is going to turn into in the next few weeks, months, but I decided for health reasons, primarily, to try and do a plant-based diet. Now, some people mean a vegetarian diet? Are you now a vegan? I have to say, I am not a vegan. And I'm going to say that because there's a lot of political negativity associated with that word. But I like to talk about being a plant-based person at this point in time in my life. Now, there are two authors that I've been acquainted with, at least these two gentlemen, for over 4 years. When I started my journey to health and fitness about 4 years ago, interestingly enough, on Ash Wednesday, and trying to practice intermittent fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays, two doctors became very, very influential and very important. One of them is Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn, who wrote a book, How to Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease, and also Dr. Joel Fuhrman, who has another book along the same lines on how to prevent heart disease or coronary artery disease. And I'm not getting any younger, as most of us are. And so I decided, for health reasons, I'm going to try this. And I have to tell you, I love my lamb chops. I love my hamburgers. I love the occasional pizza. But to be honest with you, they just don't love me. Now, the reason why I'm saying this isn't so much to talk about, look at me and how virtuous I am, because I'm not. But I am. But the reason why, and there's a reason why I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going the long way around the barn, as I want to do in most of my homilies, and that is Dr. Esselstyn. If you ever get a chance to look him up, he has lots of wonderful videos, as does Dr. Fuhrman, on how to live a plant-based life. But it's why you want to do that. And Dr. Esselstyn goes into some really interesting biology and medicine and science, and he talks about the health benefits of a plant-based diet and how it really does. He has clinical proof that it does help to reverse coronary artery disease. So when you get to be my age, that becomes very important. So, but anyway, he has a talk, and he gives his talk many times and many places, and he says something very, very powerful. And so he says, coronary artery disease is nothing more than a paper toothless tiger. Now, that sounds like a bold statement, because how can you say that? What is your scientific proof that what you're trying to present is going to help me avoid a heart attack? Okay? Now, when I heard that statement for the first time, again, I thought that's a pretty bold statement. How are you going to back that up? How are you going to prove that what you said is true? Yeah, and again, I'm not here to talk about coronary artery disease and how to prevent it, but if you're interested, you can read the books by these two doctors, and maybe you'll glean something from them. Maybe it'll be a benefit to you. But that statement about coronary artery disease should never, ever exist, and it's nothing more than a toothless paper tiger. One day, as I was meditating upon a funeral, those words kind of got reef-shaped, because when you plan a funeral liturgy and you're going to give a reflection on the readings, a lot of times I would read the story that we just encountered a few minutes ago about Lazarus in the tomb. and Jesus going to visit him and call him forth to a new life. Now, a lot of times I share these words very similar to what Dr. Esselstyn says, but in the context of death and resurrection. And I like to start off my funeral liturgy homilies by simply saying that death for the Christian, for those who have been baptized in the waters of regeneration, is nothing more than a paper, toothless tiger. And again, many people would say, well, that's a very bold statement. Obviously, how can you say that as a minister, as a priest, as a Christian? I mean, what gives you the right to say such an outlandish, such a bold thing? You're talking about death should not be fearful to a Christian. What do you mean? Well, again, today this gospel so beautifully demonstrates what Jesus really not only has said to Martha, but what he says to us, what he reveals to these people of his time and to our time. Now, I usually give this homily, and so it's kind of almost like my funeral homily that I give. I have some variations on it from time to time because I think people kind of get tired of hearing the broken record, but it's not a broken record because it's true. Jesus came to conquer sin and death. That's what the whole message of Easter is all about. And again, we will proclaim that message to the world in just a couple of weeks. We will, our annual Easter anthem is that Christ is risen, indeed he is risen. But again, when we read this gospel, I think I love this gospel so much because there's such a human element in there. It's not just a quote-unquote little theological treatise. In fact, it kind of even makes, I wouldn't say it makes fun of theology or apologetics, not at all. But it does there's a layer of that inside of it which kind of is gently refused. It's like, this is not what we're talking about here. Okay, so what I usually say at this time is I'll say that I always question why Jesus waited 2 days to go and see Lazarus. We are told that he is sick, and when the word came that he was very ill, you would have to imagine, again, everything came by, they didn't have telephones or iPhones or even telegraph or even carrier pigeons. Well, maybe they had carrier pigeons, but bottom line is that by the time the news got to Jesus, Lazarus was probably very, very close to death if he hadn't already expired. And Jesus does something that I think is always intriguing. What does he do? Well, does he immediately say, okay, guys, we got to go see Lazarus. We got to go now. When you and I get that phone call from a loved one saying somebody's in the hospital, maybe it's our mom, our dad, a brother, maybe it's our spouse, maybe it's a child, or one of our kids, or maybe just a dear, dear, dear friend. 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to call your boss and say, I'm sorry, I've got, my father just has been taken with a heart attack. God forbid, and he's in Enloe, and I've got to go down, and I've got to go now. Most of the time, the boss will say, oh, "Absolutely, I understand." Maybe you're visiting somebody, and you get a text, and all of a sudden, oh wow, I'm sorry, I got to go. Why? Well, my mom's in the hospital. No, okay, got it. So, but Jesus doesn't immediately attend to them, and it almost seems a little. When you look back on it in retrospect, it's almost like, well, why did he do that? What's going on here? Jesus, come on. You're Jesus. You're supposed to be, ministering to people who are really in need. And this is not only a person that's in need, he's your friend. So, but there's a reason, and it's interesting because he even says to the disciples, don't worry, this is not going to end in death, although it kind of does, but it's going to end with God being glorified. So he kind of prepares them guys, don't get upset. Just trust me. Just trust me on this one. So finally they go and they find that Lazarus, in fact, has not only he has succumbed to his illness and he's gone. He's died. And so we're told that Mary stays at home, and Martha goes to the tomb, and it's not the empty tomb yet. And I love it because when Jesus arrives, you hear in her voice when she says, Lord, if you'd only been here, my brother wouldn't have died. You can honestly hear in her voice, Lord, where were you when we needed you the most? Maybe even a little bit stinging is, Jesus, you let us down when we needed you the most. And that's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing but in many ways, that's what she's saying. And yet, it's so human, it's so understanding. Here's a person consumed with pain and grief and loss. And somehow, when Jesus shows up, it's like you're a day late and a dollar short. Where were you when we needed you? And Jesus knows. He knows the broken heart that Martha has. And so what he does is he begins to try to say, okay, don't look at the circumstances as they are right now. Do you believe, but those who believe in me, will, rise again, and they'll never die. And she kind of like thinks, uh-oh. Okay, here we go, a little Sunday school lesson, a theology class. Here we go into apologetics, here we go into we're going to open up the catechism and, go through that. It's like Jesus is saying, no, I'm not trying to talk to you about some kind of a theology. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to share with you something that's very beautiful and powerful and real. And it's in your midst. You see, every time Jesus made a proclamation of who he says he was, he always kind of backed it up with something real and tangible. When Jesus said that he's the bread that has come down out of heaven, he kind of shows that to his followers by feeding over 5,000 hungry people, with just 2 loaves and a few fish, okay? So all of a sudden, it's like every time Jesus reveals something about who he says he is, he then backs it up with something real. And so now he tells Martha that he is the resurrection and the life. Again, this isn't a Sunday school lesson. This isn't a theology class. This is reality. And he basically says, and do you believe this? And so, again, she kind of thinks we're talking theology or whatever. And he says, okay, never mind. And now this reading that I read says he actually got perturbed, whether he was perturbed at Martha or perturbed at the unbelief, I'm not sure. But, okay. So now he goes, and to prove that he is the resurrection of life, he goes to this tomb and he simply calls his friend by name. Lazarus, come forth. And this dead man, who was once dead, now for the second time draws again the new breath of life in his lungs, and he walks out a living, breathing, whole human being. Because why? Because Jesus is who he says he is. And who does he say he is? He says that I am the resurrection and the life. And that's why I think, as bold as it is, we can truly say that death, for the Christian, is nothing more than a paper, toothless tiger. Hope you got something out of that this week. God bless you today and every day. And we bless you, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.